Signs of the Southland, Sunday, February 20th, 2022. Mr. Grant, seems like we have a very large slate to cover today, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think we just need to dive right in because otherwise we're going to be here until well after sundown. So,
Well, sundown's only in another 45 minutes, so let's race the sun, shall we? Let's
sounds good.
start on the club sports circuit with the hockey team. They were, I guess, self-proclaimed ACC champs after beating Clemson last weekend. I think that game was right around the time we were recording, so we didn't have a result in hand just then.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they won it in overtime too. So congrats to them. Not really sure who else is in the ACC of the South. I think was how they worded it, like ACC South champs or something like that. I
I
don't
think
know.
it's just a. I think it's one of those things where it's just a three-team trophy situation
Uh,
with FSU, Clemson, and Tech being in that division as ACC representatives. Because that we talked about this last week. That entire conference is a bunch of SEC teams, Kennesaw, and then I think
Lynn, I think
UA Huntsville,
Lynn
and
or something
then
like that. Tampa, something maybe.
yeah, it's like a bunch. It was originally an SEC, like fully SEC, and then they added bits and pieces from other regional clubs. But I mean, I like claiming random trophies, so I will put this up on the board. We'll make a banner for it. It'll be great. Um,
Fly
Moving
forever.
on to other trophy games, soccer played Athens, but you said that they didn't have results up when you last checked.
Yeah, I checked Twitter and Instagram, and yeah, I saw the announcements for the games, but don't really know how to find the results. So yeah, fun times.
Big, big shrug. Let's head over to men's lacrosse. They dispatched Vandy very handily by 8 goals and then put a 9 goal pasting on James Madison. They're back to being a championship level ball club, huh?
Yeah, I mean, they. I don't think they ever really fell off. If we're talking about, I think we talk about, oh, what's Tech's most consistent program a lot, or at least allude to it. And I mean, I get this is outside of the varsity world, but I think it would have to be them or something close to that.
I'm surprised that you didn't shoehorn swim club in there, but that's besides the point.
We can talk about my hot takes about them probably not coming close to a national championship this year some other time, but lacrosse is just as strong as ever. It's looking like.
Speaking of the other lacrosse team, the women's lacrosse team, they did not post results from their last couple of games, so kind of in the weeds on that one, huh?
Yeah, don't really know what's up there. There was a post about like playing well, but I didn't see any scores. So, oops.
Cool. That rounds up the club sports circuit. Let's round both diamonds on campus real quick. Softball went to Mississippi State this past weekend. They finished up today. They went 3-2 on the weekend. They beat Mississippi State, the hosts once. Southern Illinois was it Southern Illinois? Southern Illinois twice. Lost to Central Arkansas. We'll get to that in a moment. And then got run ruled in their first game versus Mississippi State. So give me your initial impressions of how this 3-2 weekend went.
I mean, I think the goal was to go at least 3-2 or better. But I definitely had that Mississippi State both games penciled in as like the toss up lost games. Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a little bit of a jarring start to the weekend, losing to Central Arkansas. But I will say, in terms of bouncing back to make the most of it, obviously the Mississippi State run rule game was a bit tough. We can talk specifics about that in a sec, but overall, they took care of business against Southern Illinois, and then today's game was great. Classic Nelliman outing. They got runs when they needed to by having a great eye for the zone, even on a day when, and this is the only game I was able to catch the stream for. There was a couple of high leverage calls that probably could have gone for walks, if you will. Where
Umpire was having one. He was on one today.
Kauf looked a little bit taken aback by one call in particular that he called a strike, and it was wide outside the zone and low down. So not really sure what the ump saw there, but I mean, obviously Tech did a great job of honestly taking pitches and waiting for a good pitch to get the ball around or the bat around, and they chased the pitcher relatively early because they had really great vision there, and I think that always allows you to kind of take more advantage and put on insurance runs. And Mississippi State got one late, but when you're tacking on one or two an inning in the late innings, that's exactly what you want to see, especially against Power 5 opponent. That's going to be kind of how they win games, and I think maybe the bats will play more of a factor here at some point. I don't think 4-1 is the limit of their potential even against a good team.
Yeah, I think the situation here today specifically was that it was a really intense pitcher's duel until right around the fourth or the fifth inning, where Tech was able to put a couple runners on, and then things got shaky for Mississippi State and their starting pitcher. Tech put on a couple runs. They were able to drive in a couple, and then Mississippi State pulls their starter for a pitcher that had a 10.45 ERA, which not sure that's all that great, but surely maybe not the person you want to put in that situation, even despite the sample size. It was an interesting scenario for a lot of the game, and for a while it was zooming. Like this game, I think we zoomed through like 5 innings in about an hour. Yeah, it was going real fast. We had a couple of 10-pitch innings, so it was a really, really well-pitched game, which contributes to sort of the whole offensive or lack of offensive firepower. Just to double back to some of the other games of the weekend and review those real quick. You already touched on the Central Arkansas result and what that means a little bit, but it's not a great result at all, especially considering the caliber of opponent. Nelman just got herself in a really bad spot. She put a couple runners on, had a couple errors in an inning, ended up with the bases loaded and just got grand slammed. Just really unfortunate, unlucky situation in that 5th inning versus Central Arkansas. But she, like you said, she was able to bounce back today and put together a really, really good outing, reminiscent of something that we saw on opening weekend.
Motorcycle.
Sorry, you're right.
Terrible.
I was pulling up this the NCAA softball results, so that way we could talk a little bit about the rest of what this means in particular. But NCAA attacked me with an ad, so that was nice.
I keep telling you to use an ad blocker, and you never listen to me.
That's true. I never listened to Akshay. That's
very true. Moving right along, the first Mississippi State game was kind of just a meltdown on the mound from cover to cover. Chandler Dennis had a really rough day to start it off. I think she gave up 3 hits. She was able to get out of the inning, but it was 3 hits, 3 runs. Let me actually make sure I have that straight. Yeah, 3 hits, 3 runs, all 3 earned, a walk, a wild pitch, all in 6 at-bats and 7 batters faced. Not super ideal, not a great second or third outing for her in a Tech uniform. But she did have a really good start versus Southern Illinois, and was able to put together a really good game there. So all in all, my opinion on this weekend is kind of just a big shrug. Like, I don't really know what to make of it beyond the pitching seems to be the issue again. But again, all of these are small sample size items. You have to get 10 or 15 or 20 games into the season before you can really start to make sweeping generalizations about a team. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I agree. I think we need more time. Obviously, Central Arkansas, not a great result. Honestly, you don't want to see a lot of runs given up, but I was more interested in the fact that our bats didn't really come alive. I mean, against a lot of mid and low majors, you'd think Tech hitters would feast on that. But like I said, or like you said, sorry, this week is going to give us a lot of data. 8 games.
This is one of the
this week.
This is one of the busiest game weeks I've ever seen for a Georgia Tech sport. Like, it's ridiculous. Like you said, it's an 8-game week with most of those, I think all of those at home, right?
Yep.
Oh, no, the Penn State one is up at Penn State, I think.
No. They're all down here. I-75 challenge.
Well, all of them at home. So, rattling them off.
It's much too cold to be in State College this time of year. What I was going to say, I think it's worth noting. We have Furman and Georgia State's. We're doubling up on the midweeks as well. Penn State's the gem of the weekend. Those are both going to be on Friday, 2 p.m. and 4:30 against them.
Oh, those on TV?
ACC Network Extra, ACC Network for the Georgia State game, 3 p.m. on Wednesday. So
it's a good one to have on right at the end of the workday.
If you find yourself, well, end of the workday, I still got 3 hours left on mine when that rolls around.
It's near the end of the workday.
Anyways, Penn State, that's going to be the tell of the weekend, but also Jacksonville State. Don't sleep on that doubleheader on Sunday. It is Sunday. It's the end of a long week, and we have been known to drop a game to Jacksonville State or two in the past. So don't look past the Gamecocks there.
If I remember correctly, they also had a bit of a howler versus ETSU last year. So
it was ETSU last year, I think, but.
Directional Tennessees, they all fall into the same box personally. But
that was a wacky first game, and then there was like 2 cancellation thing, and then they were like looking for games. It was odd. It was odd.
They just drove up to Tennessee one week, or in the middle of the week one week, and we're like, okay, we're playing this team now. It was interesting, but yeah, that one's also, I guess, one to, just third screen, like scroll on your phone, keep that one in your mind, I guess, just to see if they built on last year.
Yeah, I think we can just really quick, high level, round out the softball talking about the rest of the ACC, given that it is a big weekend for softball with the St. Pete Clearwater Elite Invite. Obviously, that's probably the premier early season place to be for a lot of teams. In terms of ACC teams that were there, we'll start with Thursday's action. Notre Dame fell to number 15 Tennessee. Notre Dame having a quietly very excellent year last year for themselves. They followed that up with another loss, a 2-1 at the hands of Wisconsin, while also Clemson beat Texas Tech 8-0, and number 5 Florida State turned around and beat Tennessee 9-3. So very mixed bag there, mostly for Notre Dame taking the tough losses. Obviously, we know what's up with Tech. Pitt was down at Texas A&M, so they played a couple of games. They handled the mid-majors. Louisville, interestingly, played Villanova, a team we saw last week, beat them 10-7 on Friday and 3-2 in extras today. So again, more of the middle of the ACC differentiation, starting to get some common data points. UNC beat Florida Atlantic 2-1. Team Louisville beat twice last weekend. So again, more data points in terms of other matchups of interest, of actually like ranked matchups. North Carolina also fell to a ranked Missouri team. Florida State beat a top 10 Texas team. Wow, there's a lot more results on here than I was bargaining for when I started this bit. But number 8.
Round it up. Come on.
I was going to say number 8, Virginia Tech, notably lost to Alabama 1-0. Duke also played Villanova, so more data points there. Clemson with the upset or the slight victory over Tennessee. They're very similar in the rankings. And I'm going to drop this bit after this because I can't do Saturday and Sunday. There's just too much going on. Point is, this is more than I bargained for. Softball is in full swing. ACC is seeing some decent to good results. And yeah, I don't know if there's anything that's like kind of a warning sign. It's Notre Dame's relative inconsistency, I guess, as well as Clemson getting upset by Northwestern. But then again, Northwestern just beat UCLA today. So who really knows? It's still so early. It's the second weekend of the sport.
We got a long way to go until we start talking about Oklahoma City and all that fun stuff. But obviously, I think we can talk about Omaha for Georgia Tech baseball as they've gone 3-0 on the weekend. Before I get into my little rant, what are your thoughts on this weekend, how it went, what you saw that you liked?
Yeah. In terms of the raw numbers, the raw results at the highest level, a sweep is a good way to start the season. We can dive into, took us a long time to catch that lead in the Sunday game. And, scary ninth inning cardiac jackets, almost a horrifying, heartbreaking loss on Friday. But at the end of the day, a 3-0 weekend is a 3-0 weekend. I do think that we found out a little bit about the team. And keep in mind, Wright State was immensely effective at scoring runs last year, and they returned a lot of that offense as well. So in terms of mid-majors, really a great one to challenge a young or unproven or uncertain staff early. And I think we definitely learned. We saw some good performances, some performances with good in them. And I think, it should be a little more clear moving from here. And I think that applies to the lineup as well. But really, we focused a lot on pitching last week in terms of all the content we made. And I think it's only understandable that since that is, such a question in the past, that it remains a question today.
Yeah, and let's get into that a little bit. My feeling after watching the Friday and the Saturday games in person was that the starting pitching was fine. Like, it was okay. I think you made a really good point when you said that there were performances that had good in them, because neither the Friday or the Saturday start was particularly fantastic. But you could see that Chance Huff has had an opportunity to figure some of his kinks out from last year. And he put together a nice couple of innings before things sort of got lost in the middle innings. Zach Maxwell had a really rough first inning, but he calmed down and was really good the rest of the way. Sunday, I think, was a little bit of an outlier in a couple ways. You have a freshman making his first ever start. He too was doing really well until he just sort of got dealt a bad hand. And I want to pull that up really quick. He just had a really rough third inning, but he was rolling the first couple innings, and just got really unlucky on a couple of hits. So obviously, there's some work to be done. But I think what you said, to finish up, what you said about performances having good in them, especially at a position that we knew was going to be critical coming into this season, I think that's the takeaway, really.
Yeah. And I think especially on Friday, that's like that whole, I guess, outing for Huff kind of swung on one swing. It was a 3-run home run. That's, one of the more efficient ways to get some runs in baseball. I don't think that's necessarily a huge warning sign, right? It's a home run. It happens sometimes. It's not like he was struggling a ton with command or yielding a ton of walks or anything like that. I'm gonna say it was opening weekend. And I think it's a bit silly of an analysis to keep coming back to that. But, we learned enough to know that there are aspects, I think, of all three. Well, I guess Vinatieri wasn't around last year, but particularly of Huff and Maxwell, that we can say pretty definitively that they've come and made some strides since the last time we saw them on the ball.
And obviously some of these things are going to take some more time to crystallize. Right. We said the exact same thing with softball. It's still only 3 games. It's only 10 at bats. It's at XYZ. Right.
Yep.
So we just need more data before we make firmer conclusions. But I do want to, not to dampen the mood per se, but I do want to harp on that Wright State 9th inning from Friday, because that was not a particularly good outing for a Tech bullpen that we knew, again, was going to be a turning point, or it was going to be a focal point for this team this year. And
that's really interesting that you bring that up, because I don't think of all the pitchers we saw in particular, I want to highlight that Dawson and Luke, Bartnicki, as traditional closer, as the second and third pitchers there, were brought into extremely suboptimal situations and not given a lot of like leeway there. I think let me pull up the exact pitch.
I have it. Dawson Brown got one out. He only faced two batters. Luke Bartnick, he also got one out. He allowed one run. He had one walk, one wild pitch, but only had two batters faced.
And exactly that's my point, right? You bring them into suboptimal innings. They're pitching with, a lot of constraints around. And Dawson threw, what was it? I think of his 9 pitches, 8 of them were strikes. Like,
give me 1 second to pull that up. I have it somewhere.
I don't know if they're looking at matchups there per se, or just not wanting to.
I don't see it actually.
A lot of risks, but it kind of worked out as the worst case scenario, anyways. So I think it's a little bit much to have been the quick hook there. And I mean, maybe you're trying to save guys for later in the weekend for another appearance, but
I think the counterpoint there, or counterpoint's not the right word, but the another point there is that Danny was pretty public about saying you're going to see a lot of pitchers this weekend. He was very public about saying, okay, we're going to rotate pitchers in. We're going to give guys some time. Obviously, he wasn't able to give guys time in stress less innings a lot of the time, especially in that 9th inning. But you saw a bevy of pitchers at least come in and attempt to salvage that. And then, I mean, it ended up working out, right? So we can't harp on it too much per se, but there's something to be said for a quick hook in those situations, especially with Brown. I think we saw a couple of social media comments and a couple other points of criticism with pulling Brown that early. And even I think I would have liked to see him stay in for at least another batter. Yeah. Okay. I think that's all. Do you have anything else on this, or?
I again would like to like that. I would have liked to see him in there a little longer. I do want to talk about non-pitchers though, if that's allowed.
Pitchers only pitching talk here. Okay, we'll go for it.
This is very clearly one of the most dangerous offenses in the nation. I think that's pretty abundantly clear. They're a liability to score. They're liable to score at any time, whether that's
those are two very different words: liability and liable.
Yeah. Oh, hush. Whether that's drawing walks, unleashing some of the newfound speed on the base paths, or hitting. The classic. Lace a single, lace a double, hit a home run, whatever. But I think it is worth noting that it's probably, again, we talked about schedule congestion coming up this week. We have 2 midweeks and a 3-game series against Gardner-Webb. Southern, Presbyterian, and 3 against Gardner-Webb is a imperative time looking that the next weekend series is against UGA. But this time now, these 5 games is imperative for the bottom of the lineup, and in particular, Colin Hall and John Anderson to wake up. In terms of consistency throughout the lineup, I think it was the 2 of them that were off to the slowest start, and hopefully they can feast on these 5 games coming up, kind of see the ball. And that's one of the things.
That Southern to Presbyterian turnaround, I mean, that's like a 4-hour drive down to Southern on a bus. And then you gotta get up, go to class, and then play the next day too. That's a rough one. It's like playing an NBA back-to-back in 2 different cities on the West Coast, right? So
it's a 6 p.m. game against Southern too. Like, it's not even like we're leaving.
They're not going to get back.
2.
You're not going to get back until
2 or 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Unless you stay overnight and then just drive back first thing in the morning, and then you're missing
which
class.
Is even worse.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. Well, they'll figure it out. They're athletes.
You do have your star of the weekend?
I do. I given that I guess watched the most baseball this week, the both of us. Chandler Simpson, the transfer from UAB. You mentioned him as a really big threat on the base paths, and I'm inclined to agree. He has brought, I think, a level of aggressiveness on the base paths. And maybe they were tooling around with it, seeing if it would work. But I think he's added that as a tool in the arsenal, right? And a really good tool, because he's a threat to steal any time that he's on base. To the point where if I'm an opposing pitcher, I would you got to focus on getting a strikeout there. You got to either force soft contact or get him to strike out, because if you walk him, you hit him. If he gets on base, whatever, he's going to steal on you. And if your catcher is not good enough to throw him out at second, you're going to let in some runs really quickly. And I really, really like what he brought, both from the plate and defensively. I think he's a really solid addition. Really good replacement for Luke Waddell at shortstop as well.
Yeah, feels kind of like a cheat code. We've alluded to next week's games. Home games are streamed on ACC Network Extra, so plenty of content for those of you unable to make it to Midtown, but plenty of tickets to buy if you are in Midtown, and especially I think they're selling like a $10 ballpark pass or something for softball and baseball, and with double headers every day of the weekend, plus baseball games every day of the weekend. A lot of stuff to see going on there.
I will bring up one thing though that did make me upset this weekend at baseball. Softball, I guess, wasn't here, and they don't have this policy. But McNeese Ballpark at Rush Chandler Stadium now has a clear bag policy, which also applies to students now. For whatever reason, in God's name, they've applied it to students. Historically, like, you and I have done homework at the ballpark. We've been on ACC Network and its predecessors on TV being seen doing homework at the ballpark. It's a time-honored tradition for students to bring their backpacks and come straight from class. This is just a massive barrier to entry for that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I spent a lot of hours doing MATLAB in the stands on the third base line. I'll own it. It's a tech thing. I mean, call me a nerd, whatever. I don't care. But
we're all nerds listening and producing this podcast. I think you're fine. You're among friends.
There are a not insignificant amount of people whom that bar is a pretty fine line, right? And whether that's having to go back to their apartment or car or dorm to drop their stuff off and then come back, or even between classes, right? If it's an afternoon game and you've got a late lab or something like that, dropping in for a few innings is pretty big. And it's kind of the opposite problem that we saw to last year's extremely limited supply of tickets. I mean, I know I only wound up going to 4 or 5 games just because I could only get out of class and get in line or
because it was like a 3 or 4 hour affair. And I think to get tickets last year, and I think, extenuating circumstances, some things about that could have been handled better. I think the number of tickets maybe could have been a little larger for students, but in general, maybe you can write that one off as, okay, we're in a specific situation.
What are they supposed to do? Pack the place?
Other schools did that for better or for worse, but it's just, you're right. It's the reverse of that situation where it's a reverse in some ways, and it's also the same thing, right? You're adding a barrier to entry for, in that case, it was a justified reason. In this case, it's a completely unjustified reason.
It kills interest because it kills access. And that's how kids get into sport, is access, right? So I think it's one of the reasons why tech lacrosse is so popular, in that literally it's right in front of you with no walls. I mean, I guess there's a fence, but a lot of people just—
there are nice stands there now.
Yeah.
The CRC built a bunch of nice concrete stands there. It's all a nice little venue in the corner of the sack fields.
But my point there is the bar is so low. You got to put the bar on the floor. Otherwise people won't go.
Yeah. I'm fine with paying $10 for tickets, because I'm an adult, but you can have barriers to entry for adults. You can't have barriers to entry for students. You want students to come to your games.
Otherwise, they won't come back when they're adults. Wow.
Yeah, that's the rub. Let's move on because I
got one more.
Okay, you got one more stinger?
Going around the horn just a little bit. Pittsburgh is going to be bad. They had a very bad weekend. North Carolina's offense looks good. Pitching seems to have answered some of their questions. I'm just trying to pull out some interesting things from other box scores. NC State's vaunted offense. They were top 10 College World Series last year, opened the weekend winning against Evansville 24-6. They'll be able to score runs. They will be
That's a
able
football
to.
score.
Yep. VMI beat Duke on Friday. That's ranked Duke, by the way. So delightful. Clemson throttled Indiana. Always interesting. Wake Forest at home in their bandbox ballpark with tiny dimensions did beat Lafayette 25-3. So interesting there as well. Miami played a similarly tight game with Towson as we did with Wright State. In terms of Saturday, Pittsburgh did come back and beat Canisius, but I believe they lost Sunday. So oops. North Carolina, again, poured on the offense, 19-0 over Seton Hall. They'll be able to score a lot too. Let's see. Anything else jumping out at me from Saturday? Duke bounced back with a win. Clemson, 19-4, a win there too. So pretty interesting. Miami handled Towson in both games that they played. I believe that's a 4-game series because they concluded that today. One last note, Clemson polished off the sweep. Duke almost lost the second game to VMI, North Carolina's closest game of the weekends today. So watch out for that Sunday starter. That might be key down the line. But around the ACC, everything else basically shook out as expected, other than, like I said, Pittsburgh did drop the series to Canisius. Don't really know what's going on there. They let up a lot of runs. So maybe that collapse we saw from them late last year is still ongoing. Or maybe it's the first weekend and it doesn't matter at all. Go figure.
Sample sizes be damned. Let's move on to your favorite part of campus, Macaulay Aquatic Center and the Georgia Tech swim team at ACC Championships, which you had the honor and privilege of covering in person. First, before we get to the results, tell us about the experience of sitting up in that press box, but actually being there in official capacity for once instead of studying.
I mean, I sit up there for a lot of meets. Not that they make you get credentials for the other meets, but yeah, I study in a lot of places. Okay, that's why I graduated.
Get to the point.
Anyways, very easy. The ACC made the credentialing experience very seamless. So very much a shout out to Andy and the gang over there. They do a great job running their events. And as always, when they come to town, great product value and kind of atmosphere that they put on. They've really stepped that up over the years. Kind of noted this a couple of years back with the U.S. Open, but the TV cameras were great. Those angles are a lot better than they were 5 years ago. And then they've stepped up the production value as well. But great getting to talk to them. And yeah, I think their idea to bring the men's and women's swimming and diving championships to the same weekend really added a level of depth in terms of the atmosphere, having the parents for the men and the women, having the athletes for the men and the women, and having the, I guess, support staffs, right? You're doubling your, not necessarily a one-to-one in doubling, because there are some repeats there. Tech kids probably, if you're a junkie or a tech varsity swimmer, you're probably going to be there regardless. But yeah, great for the environment. I think that was the most fun non-NCAA, non-national championship NCAA level meet I've been to. So definitely great to see there. And Andy and his team did an awesome job, and we're super welcoming even to non-traditional media such as us, because sometimes that's a bit of a challenge too.
Yeah. Let's actually get into the results. I'm glad you had a really good experience, but what we're all here for is the results of the competition. Men did a really good job. You have them listed as their best finish in years. They finished 5th, and the women placed 10th. Let's talk about that men's finish real quick. You said it was the second highest finish of the current regime. What did that look like on the stat sheet?
Yeah, so it's really interesting that we've kind of arrived at this point, because throughout the years that we've talked about swimming and talked about the ACCs, is we've kind of established that there are, and we'll refresh you here, there are some tiers in ACC swimming, right? Sometimes there's a little jockeying around, but over the last 8 to 10 years, NC State has by far dominated ACC swimming on the men's side and the women's side, but in particular the men's side. Louisville did have a breakthrough year, so that there are times when people can pop up and kind of challenge that. But NC State at the top, Louisville Virginia Tech and Virginia kind of in that next tier, with Louisville being a little bit above them. And then there's just kind of this miasma or this soup of teams that exist under them. Georgia Tech, Florida State, UNC, Notre Dame, Pittsburgh, and Duke. All of those teams, those 5 through 10 teams, are all, rankable. They're all fringy or definite top 25 teams, depending on the day and the opponent. But in terms of the men's team, we've really seen our team struggle to break through from that, 7, 8, 9 position and really establish themselves in the top 5. And yeah, they were in 4th for a solid chunk, maybe like the first 2 days, I think, of the meet. But eventually those UVAs and Virginia Techs, they stratify, right? It's all that depth, and ACCs are all about depth, rather than just trying to get top end finishes and score the most points. But it's who's placing what in those C finals and B finals that does really make a difference there. Getting 4 or 5 swimmers in an event. In the past, Florida State has really kind of been up there too. But I think where that makes a difference is, in particular, Tech was able to notch some higher relay finishes than we've seen them get in the past, as well as just, again, having better depth. We've talked a lot about what the freshmen have brought to the team, and then having Kyle and Christian, Kyle Paputis.
Sounds like what you're saying is pretty fire, Jake.
Yeah, no, Zoom just asked if I was playing music. No, I am not. But Kyle Paputis and Christian Ferraro and Kyle Barone being around for another year kind of allowed that to culminate and allowed them to pop through. But it's a matter of, taking that to NCAAs and then being sustainable in terms of longer term. But for this week, they were absolutely excellent. So is that enough context? I feel like I rambled a little bit there. But
No. I think that's really good context, especially because we've been talking about this men's team, as being one of the best in Georgia Tech history, right? Just based on you've said it, not me, to be fair.
I just think I hear that and I know it's true, but I imagine being one of our listeners or somebody who's not as in tune with the swimming and being like, really, our best team ever just finished 5th in the conference? Like, what?
Okay, but I think the part of that is that you have to adjust to an ACC that is really good at all of the country club sports. But but prior to the modern era of the ACC, Georgia Tech was sweeping the deck of the SEC with swimming for a number of years, right? We've talked about that before. But in the modern era in the ACC, these are some of the best men's finishes that we've seen ever.
Yeah, between basically every big school with a swim team, between Texas and North Carolina State, is really, really good. And, you get some California schools in there too. Cal, Stanford. Jeez.
I'm just saying, this men's team, pretty fire, dog. Pretty fire.
I'm kind of concerned. I hope all those restaurants on Howell Mill are all right, because they're headed that way. But what was I going to say? Yeah, no, it's a little bit jarring, I'm sure, to outsiders seeing 5th. That's like, what's up there? But NC State's one of the best run programs, in any sport in the NCAA, in terms of efficiency and success. And then just really strong programs. Louisville really invests in their non-rev sports. They've got great coaches there. Virginia really invests in their non-rev sports, got great coaches there too. But I also don't think it's a coincidence that at a kind of trickle down level, you see really good club teams from Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, UF, Texas, all these schools that we talk about as having great varsity teams. You have a great pool and you have a great education. I think that's basically what it takes. And then building a staff around that to have a really good team. So
cool. Well, that sort of wraps it up for the men. I don't think you talked about diving. Diving will be kind of decided. We'll have more to say on that after zone meets. And that's next weekend, I think. I don't have it on the calendar in front of me. Let's switch over to talking about the women's team. Like I said, they finished 10th. What was your take on their performance? What did you see that surprised you, interest you? What do you want to point out?
Yeah, I mean, as always, and you touched on diving just a little bit. I think we kind of sell them a little bit short sometimes, but Cameron Hidalgo as the not unofficial, but, as one of the definite leaders of that team, has really made an indelible impact. So if we're talking women, it starts and ends with Hidalgo. And then we have a great team behind her as well there. They've been pretty consistent on the boards through her tenure. And then on the men's side, Ruben Lechuga definitely medaled a couple times as well there. So don't want to forget that. But in terms of the women, we actually had Mackenzie Campbell notch 2021 invite level times. So if you're unfamiliar with how the NCAA invite process works, it's basically double tiered. It's very confusing and kind of silly, but basically if you get
we've explained it before.
Yeah. If you get an A cut, you're in. If you get a B cut, you might be in. And they kind of even out all the events to a set number of swimmers. And anyone who's in that range that gets an invite in an event in that B cut range gets to swim all their events with the consideration there then being, if you get invited, you get to swim all your B cut events. So again, I know that's really, really rushed way to go through that. But point is, Mackenzie Campbell did get invite level times. So B cuts that were invited last year in the 4 IM and 200 fly. So she's got a nice chance of swimming one or getting invited in one or both, and then therefore being able to swim the other. Outside of that, no other invite level cuts, but we did see a number of different swimmers. By my count, it was 7, including Mackenzie Campbell, notch B cut times or better with the invite level B cuts. So definitely great to see there. I think their depth's gotten better, but the rest of the conference has just been tremendous. And especially in the relays where points are doubled, I think that's where we've seen the Tech women kind of sit comfortably in that 10th place and, notably ahead of those programs that are behind them. I believe that is Boston College, and I don't want to get the other one wrong. It's Boston College and Pittsburgh. Yeah. Comfortably ahead of Pittsburgh and just miles ahead of BC. So we talked about the Super, the miasma. Tech finished just narrowly behind Miami, within shooting distance of Florida State. And then there's kind of another ledge, a little more stratified in terms of the layers with women swimming, but in the neighborhood of Miami and FSU.
Okay. It's 10th on the stat sheet isn't 10th out of 12 isn't the best, but I think like we've been talking about with other teams, there's signs of progress, right? There's signs of growth. When we talked about the depth on that women's team the last couple of years, and it's still young, right? A lot of the talent on this program is still pretty young, so it can only really go up.
Well, and that's the thing too, is with the number of records that they've rewritten this year, there's an argument that maybe not the best Georgia Tech women's team ever, but certainly a very, very good one. And it's just tough to do that in a very crowded swimming neighborhood. And again, this is one of those sports where it just takes time to build stuff. And I mean, you can only hope that as folks who are doing well now graduate, they're backfilled by people who hear that, it's a great program and a great place to go to school too. So
that Turkish pipeline just needs to keep churning out stars and Olympians.
Yeah. I mean, what's the downfall of recruiting an entire Olympic team to your team? Like, certainly there's got to be something good there. But I think before we move on from swimming, we talked a little bit about how the women shake up coming up next at NCAAs. Can we briefly touch on the men? Because that's going to be the big one.
All right. Give me the quick rundown.
Yeah. So we talked about qualifying standards, A, B, and then that invite level. Relays work a little bit differently, but they're qualified to the team. So basically, if you get an A cut, you can swim any relay that you have an A or B cut, but you can reorganize your swimmers however you want. However, there is no invite level. So you need to get that cut to get, invited in. So the qualifying standard, the A cut in the 200 and 400 medley relays were both met by our team. So that's great, which brings the 800 free and 200 free relays along with them, but not the 400 free relay. They did not get the standard there. Unsure whether that was done earlier in the year. I couldn't find a direct translation of that. So that means Tech has 2+2 relays, and those count double. So very important to get those across. So those will all be swimming because Kyle Pampudis did get an A cut in the 200 breast. The relays are only invited so long as one individual also makes it. So Kaio then can swim his 200 breast, 200 IM, and 100 breast. We had another, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 swimmers. That is the most in a long time for Tech. Also get invite level cuts. 3 of those in multiple events, Mert Kilabus, Berke Saka, and Christian Ferraro. And then Kyle Barone and Baturunlu each got 1 apiece. So those will bring, hopefully, all 5 extra of them. But those 5 athletes also had 4 swims, count 4 B cuts as well. So that would definitely be Tech's busiest slate of NCAA qualifiers in quite some time. And if they can translate that well, that might mean topping that top 21 finish from last year. And that's a pretty good thing.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about that top 21 finish last year as being a little bit of a disappointment based on how good this team is, or how good this team was last year. And it's mostly the same roster, right? And they've kind of not really reloaded so much as built on top of it, right? Yeah. So I think this is where you see that sort of a breakout situation at NCAAs where you have this much talent that's going to the meet and is just going to rack up some of those points. So I think that's something to look forward to in the next couple of weeks as well.
Never underestimate if those of you who are super online and super into college baseball might have seen Steven Shoke's tweet about half of college baseball waking up to a mediocre continental breakfast and contemplating a 6-hour bus ride home after their game. Well, everyone else in the pool is going to have to be thinking about stuff like that because Tech also has as much of a home field advantage as you can get coming up. So if you're into swimming or you've never watched and might want to check it out, this is your best opportunity to catch that in Midtown. It's probably the most interesting or compelling meet outside of the Olympics. So definitely check it out.
Wish we had Rowdy Gaines on the call. That'd be the only thing that really put the icing on the cake there.
We tried to get him for club swimming nationals a couple of years ago, but then, pandemic and stuff. So
womp. Well, I've heard that there's a sport that was mostly unaffected by the pandemic. It's golf. Men's golf. Georgia Tech men's golf is currently ranked 17th in the nation. They finished 7th at the Amer Ari Invitational. Did you abbreviate this without telling me what it was going to be?
No, I kid you not. That's what it's called. And we completely
Amer Ari Invitational
last week. So shame on us.
Tell me about it. Why don't you?
The Amer Ari Invitational or what they're doing right now? That's
let's start with the Amer Ari and then we'll talk about the Shark Tooth. It's a Shark Tooth Invitational. Okay, Amer Ari. Let's focus.
Amer Ari, what a great question. Golf was played, stuff happened. Just kidding. No, they were out in Hawaii. Golf travels to some very exotic and fun places, and I'm very jealous. They've gone. I
gotta check out how much of the athletic department travel budget is just golf. I have to find out for myself.
Hey, I think Claudio and Coach Collier were in Jerusalem on recruiting like last week. So, the budget,
we'll file some FOIAs.
Love Delta. In terms of Amer Ari, Ross Steelman did finish in the top 10. Tech posted a 10 under par 278 to finish in 7th. That is a pretty solid back leg for them. They were minus 28 overall, so relatively par-ish for the course. In terms of schools that finished in front of them, North Carolina, Oklahoma State, two of the best teams on the planet. Pepperdine is always pretty good. So right in the thick of things there. Obviously, Oklahoma State kind of was able to run away with it because they're awesome in golf. But in terms of everything else, the last round was pretty good. It was pretty much par for the course. With everything else. Shout out Ben Smith for competing as an individual, and his score didn't count for the team. But he was out there and got to go to Hawaii. So, but everyone else looked fine and nothing too crazy. I mean, it's early and they're just getting into the swing of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch gears to the Shark Tooth Invitational. God, these things are just wildly named. That is at PCB in Florida, hosted by Florida State. Tech is 3 under par after one day of competition that started earlier today. Virginia Tech and number 4 UNC are tied for second place at two. Or there, you did not write this correctly. So Tech is first at 3 under, and then VT and UNC are in second, tied for at 2 under. Do I have this straight?
Yeah, and then third place is at 1 under. I think it might be Duke or something like that.
See, you need to give me more to work with on the shot sheet. You need to write it like a script. Anyway, 54-hole tournament. Was that 3 rounds? This will also be the site of the ACC championships. So like we were talking about with swimming a couple months ago, a lot of teams in the mix here just to get used to the course and prepare for that coming up at the end of the year.
Yeah. In terms of ACC teams that they're seeing, unranked Boston College, number 26 Clemson, number 53 Duke, number 35 Florida State, number 32 Louisville, number 4 North Carolina, number 34 NC State, number 15 Notre Dame, number 37 Virginia, number 62 Virginia Tech, and number 12 Wake Forest.
I think that's the entire conference.
That's 12 ACC teams. That might be everyone who plays golf in the conference.
There's no Pitt. There's no Pitt in Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no Pitt in Miami. I think those are the only 2 ones that are out.
Yeah. In terms of the current place, we did note that Tech was -3 overall. We have Connor Howe sitting in a tie for 5th at -2. We have Christo Lamprecht and Bartley Forrester in a tie for 8th. A many-way tie for 8th, a 6-way tie for 8th, that is at -1. So a lot of kids right in the mix there. So that is great to see in what is, I guess, it's the Water Sound Invitational at the Shark's Tooth Golf Course. My bad. Yeah.
Podcasting is an incredible medium.
A lot of Tech kids in the mix at what is essentially the ACC preseason championship.
Well, early season championship. It's like a September Heisman.
Yeah. Something like that.
It'd be cool. They still have 2 rounds left, so we'll keep an eye on that and keep you updated next weekend. Women's tennis is up next on the shot sheet. They dispatched UT Chattanooga 7-0. They're ranked 27th in the nation. We talked about their precipitous demise. The drop in the rankings. Past couple weeks after not doing so hot at ITAs. Do you have any thoughts on them playing Nuga? Anything that you saw that was interesting?
We need a dub. I'm fine with it.
7-0 it is. They will play Mercer tomorrow. There was a couple articles about that on RamblinWreck.com. And then they'll start ACC play at Miami and then at FSU.
Quest for 500, then just get to work in the ACC season. That's what I got for them.
Fantastic. Their counterpart on the men's side were off. They're off until March 4th. So we will move on to both teams' counterparts in men's basketball who played 2 games this past week. One was a loss versus NC State, which we'll talk about. And one was a win over Pitt, which weirdly enough ended with Josh Pastner. Josh Pastner, the guy we all know and love, saying that Jeff Capel, head coach of Pittsburgh men's basketball, should be ACC coach of the year. Mr. Grant, what is Pitt's current record, both in conference and overall?
How do we say in as few words as possible, no bueno? I believe it's 11-17 overall. Yeah, 11-17 overall and 6-11 in conference. I would get it if Pitt was like, 11-6. They're punching above their weight more than usual, but no.
This one's a Pastnerism, like the most Pastnerism to ever Pastnerism.
Yeah, and it's going to give me an aneurysm.
Good one. Well, let's talk about the loss that nearly gave me one. NC State. You checked in for the first half of this one, and all you said was 4 words on our shot sheet. This one was bad.
It was bad. The final score looks a lot less bad than it was because what did they do? They won the second half unfortunately, that does not count for half of a win. Yeah, Tech got into a very large, very early hole. They were pretty ineffective on defense, turnovers. Honestly, it felt a lot like the Miami women's game today.
Buddy, we'll get there.
The men,
we got some conversations to have there.
The men obviously had some more scoring. We're in a deeper hole, but I mean, it was rough. There's just not a lot of good stuff you can take away from that. Everyone was cold from the field. I don't know if it's midterm week in a lot of their classes or something, but it was tough. And how do you say? It's getting late in the season. Tech is now, I believe, 11-15, right? At least in terms of games that count towards D1 competition and whatnot. And there's 5 games left in the conference schedule. Syracuse on the road tomorrow at 7. Virginia Tech at home Wednesday at 9 p.m. Notre Dame on the road on Saturday. Clemson on the road March 2nd. And we close with Boston College, noon on Saturday.
Noon kick.
Yeah. So there's some winnable games left there, though. But in terms of,
like you might say, the sun, like in Atlanta currently, is getting real low.
In terms of what Tech needs, I believe they can, if they were to win out, finish 9-11. That could put them in the mix to maybe not play day one, but that would require some things really breaking their way. Virginia Tech and Syracuse both sit above them currently in the standings and would need to win no more than one more game apiece. So, we're probably going to be playing day one as much as that is no bueno. Probably needing to look at, going undefeated through the ACC tournament in order to do anything NCAA tournament wise. But hey, you never know. If Tech gets hot and wins all 5 games and then wins a game or 2 in the ACC tournament, you're talking about a pretty good NIT seed there and reeling it out of the hole. That's comically unlikely, but it's still in play. Everything is
mentionable. It's mentionable.
Until you lose in the ACC tournament, everything is still in play.
Well said. I don't have that much to add. So we're going to ship off over to the other side of McCamish Pavilion, where we have the number 16 team in the nation, Georgia Tech women's basketball, that has had, suffice to say, just an awful 2-week stretch, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, they really should be on a 5-game losing streak, if we're being quite honest.
It's pretty close to one, to be fair.
And you can, Notre Dame's a great team, or at least a very solid top 25 team. 12,
literally
13 things, 14 things that you can point to individually and go, man, if Tech had, closed out that jump shot or not let the ball get taken from them right on the inbounds twice.
If they simply scored more points in the game, they would have won.
A free throw more. They would have won, right? And that's basketball. That's why you play the games. That's why Notre Dame got the win, right? They had to do everything, but they did what it took to win. In terms of the other game, Tech has always matched up pretty poorly against Miami. It's been a thing in other solid Tech teams in the past, so I'm not going to act like this came out of nowhere. Miami plays bruising defense. That it's aggressive and doesn't always lead to fouls or ways that Tech can, I guess, just shoot their way out of it or anything like that. But they need to right the ship here before the ACC tournament, and I think it's pretty comfortable to say that hosting in the NCAA tournament is now out of the picture.
Yeah, they're going to drop pretty precipitously in the next poll because this is their 5th poor performance in a row. I think it's not super challenging, super complicated, super irrational to say that at all. I don't really understand what's wrong. I don't know enough about basketball strategy to tell you what's wrong. I think Nell herself commented on this in the last post game presser after Notre Dame. It was like, we're just not playing defense well. We're not shooting the ball well. We're not living up to the same standard that we were at the rest of the season. So it's rough to watch. It's especially because you know how good they can be, right? And the hinge point really seems to be that NC State game, to where you're kind of wondering, is everyone just watching the tape of that game? Like, is there something buried in how NC State defended this team that's just sort of a linchpin in just neutralizing every advantage it has?
Yeah, that's a good point. I just don't know. Like, I feel like we saw this happen late in last year too, though. Granted, they didn't quite soar as high, but I mean,
and they also didn't go as low. I would argue that this is lower than losing to Boston College last year. They were ripping off losses to Boston College and UNC last year.
I was going to say we lost to a pretty horrible Boston College team by a lot.
But at the same time, it's two. Yeah, but it's like there's fixture congestion last year, and that was just a 2 or 3 game slid, right? Because they dropped the game versus UNC, and then they dropped the game versus Boston College, which were both very stinky. This is the 5th stinky game that they've played in a row.
We won one of them. They got one win. Just go out, take care of business. That's what they got to do. And again, I think it's also worth noting the women's basketball overall conference standings. We talked about needing the Notre Dame game in particular. Tech now finds themselves looking up at North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Louisville, and NC State. Virginia Tech has 12 wins, as does Notre Dame in conference. Tech has 10. The worst or the best they can do is tie those numbers. So Tech's going to be fighting for that. I guess, they're probably going to get a bye. They're going to get at least one bye, but they did not get the double bye, and that is the easiest way to set yourself up for a tournament title is to play less games. So,
yeah, I think I was saying this on Twitter the other day after the ND loss, and I was like, this is frustrating. It's salvageable, but it's incredibly frustrating. I think that's something that both of us can agree on, and that's kind of the vibe that we had coming out of the arena today, which is where, I mean, they lost to such a great Miami team by 12 points.
Miami
really did not look functional at any point during the game.
I think Miami might be ranked in the next poll. They're 16-10 with 2 wins over Georgia Tech. Oof. Okay, maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, but it's not the same caliber of opponent as like losing to a Notre Dame or losing to a NC State by these kinds of margins. Agreed. Yeah, the margin was what made it bad. Tech was pretty ineffective from field goal, from 3-point range. They couldn't get things started deep in. There's some foul trouble, obviously, as well. The short bench kind of came out, but it just seemed like whatever shakeups were happening, just nothing really was working. So it's tough.
Yeah, my only thought, and this kind of doubles back to the NC State tape idea, but my only thought on that end is the way that they play basketball is grueling. It's highly physical. It's highly hustle dependent, right? And at a certain time, like a certain point, you keep running that style and you run players into the ground. And especially when you have a short bench, you're running players into the ground even more. And it's not necessarily maybe running players into the ground is an aggressive way of putting it, but it's just fatigue. Like, it's been a long season. They played a ton of games. And you play that many games at that level of intensity and at that level of hustle, it's gonna wear on you at some point, right? And maybe it's the same thing that we saw last year too.
Yeah, I'm not going to harp too much on them though. They're one of Tech's most, I guess, successful, most fun to watch, most personable teams. It's not fair to them to say, hey, how dare you, or anything like that. They're 19-8.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And I don't want to come off as that either, but it is, like, I think both of us are saying, like, it's frustrating to just be in this position, especially knowing where they could go, right?
Yep. I'm very interested to see what North Carolina's the rest of their conference schedule looks like.
Because we'd have a tiebreaker over them.
Yeah, they've got Virginia and Duke. So Duke 7-9 in conference, Virginia 2-15. So
I think that one's locked in.
Yeah, I was going to say Duke's going to need us to help us out. That would look like Tech sets up then for a rematch with Notre Dame, provided they win their first game. If everything stays the same from here. So.
Yeah, important to mention, this is also senior day. It's the last time that a lot of us will see Lorela Kabai play on campus. Lodomai Lahtinen, I think, is also part of the festivities today. Sarah Bates was part of the festivities today. So, next year is going to be interesting, and we can kind of talk about next year's roster next year.
Yeah. This team has a lot of basketball left to play. Yeah, there's only 2 regular season games left, but they're guaranteed at least one more after that. And you know, they're looking like a tournament team. So, you know, hopefully at least 4 more games, but hopefully a lot more than that too. So,
yeah, the last projection that I saw had them as a 6 seed. So I think they'll be just fine getting into the tournament with an at-large bid. That about wraps up our very, very long. I guess this is the second last episode of February. We did a lot of audio in the last 8 calendar days, didn't we?
Yep.
Why don't you plug one of the bits that we did earlier this week that people can find in the feed?
Yeah, so go ahead first and check out our episode that we did with Clayton Truder, Loser Bill, his newly released book. Sorry, I've been talking about it as if it's coming out still for so long. But his Loserville book. There is a promo code to get 40% off by using a particular link straight to the nebraskapress.unl.edu website. University of Nebraska Press is the publisher. So if you buy through them and use the code 6AF21, that'll get you 40% off. Again, we like to say no free ads on this podcast, but we also don't have any paid ads. So the things that we say and promote and plug, whether that's Georgia Tech women's volleyball or Loserville or Cypress Street Pint and Plate, we do that all because we love them and believe in what they're doing. And I guess that does make it free advertising. But Clayton's a great friend of the podcast and of the site. So go check out his book. Use that code. It makes it cheaper for you. And I see no issues with that.
Yeah, we'll put that code in the show notes along with a link like we did with the episode. But yeah, you'll find that episode in your podcast feed from last Wednesday. Mr. Grant, this has been an awesome time talking through Tech sports with you again. Do you have any other final notes?
Nope. Again, it can be real easy to let something like a Central Arkansas loss or a tough, pitching outing against Wright State, or, even losing women's basketball or men's basketball games get to you. But you got to look for the positive stuff and an opening day sweep, a win over Mississippi State and a pitching gem, and, having a lot of basketball left to play for the women and, quite frankly, for the men. They're playing at least 6 more games. So a lot of sports left and a lot to look forward to still. So good to see that. And if you're on campus for the NCAA's swimming, come say hello. So
cool. We will see you all next week.